Several years ago, I was at a conference and we were asked to engage in a thought exercise. And it was nothing fancy. The facilitators just hoped to get us to reflect together on our spiritual goals. We were all seated around in a large circle. They instructed us to get comfortable, to sit with our feet flat on the floor, to watch our breath, and to center ourselves. They began by asking us to think about our past, where we've been, our childhoods, our adolescence, our time in college or working, whatever it was that shaped us. How are we grown into the people we'd become? We sat with those thoughts for a little while. Then we were asked to think about the present, all that we were facing now, what we were struggling with, what excites us, all the hopes we had, and also the fears. What was alive in us? What was bubbling up? And what did it have to teach us? After a few moments of silence, the facilitators asked us finally to think about our future. What kind of person did you want to be when you were older, when you were near the end of your life, in those final months, final years, and had time to reflect? For me, that was the most interesting and engaging of the meditations. I have an easier time thinking about the past, which is safely familiar. I already know the past, and also the present, which can sometimes feel like it just is. But the future is unknown and thus interesting. I have an intuitive sense of what my older self might be like, or at least what I want him to be like. He would be happy. He would live someplace with snowy winters and warm fireplaces. He would probably have less hair if things continue on their current course. He would be like that character in children's books that children encounter who is kindly and wise and possesses an easy sense of wonder. Most of all, the future sense version of me would have been someone to find lasting peace, who would put to rest all the struggles and fears and anxieties and doubts, and had learned to be exactly who he was supposed to be. Now, it's been interesting over the years to notice how my understanding of maturity and wisdom has changed. The older I get, the more together I feel I'm supposed to become. But I've also noticed it's never quite that simple. Most of us, like me at that conference during that thought exercise, tend to put pretty high expectations on their future self. We do this, I think, because our futures can be exciting sometimes, but also because the present isn't always what we want. It can't hold all of our hopes that we have. Sometimes the person we want to be isn't possible now, but we still want to believe that that is a possibility in the future, so we look ahead. Our imagined future is us not giving up on ourselves. It lets us believe that our life is not yet decided, that things can change, that life can get better. Hoping for a better future is us being human. Of course, we want good things for ourselves, even when we don't feel satisfied now. At each stage of life, when we are feeling what we want, when we aren't feeling what we want to feel, it's natural to look ahead to the future. When we are kids, we look forward to growing up, when we have freedom. When we are in high school, we look forward to college when we're away from our parents. When we're in college, we look forward to the real world where we don't have to worry about essays anymore. And when we're in the real world, we look forward to that final job that we really love, to that partner we always yearn to have, maybe even to retirement, when we will finally be free of worrying. At each stage, it's so easy to shift our expectations further down the life timeline, into the future, rather than see it in the present. Part of what makes kicking the can down the road timeline so enticing is this myth which is called static time. It's a belief that is either conscious but mostly unconscious, that someday we can achieve a sense of timelessness, a stasis that one reached can give us a feeling of lasting peace and stability. Historians call something similar the end of history, that we are removed from the ups and downs and changes of life and can just be as we always want to be. There, in that end of history, is peace and equilibrium. We are no longer searching, but we have found. The goal, our destination, has been reached. We believe in static time intuitively because it gives us hope that life will eventually stop being so hard and that we can transcend whatever imperfections we have. Some religions might call that reaching enlightenment. Others suggest that it might happen by being saved with a relationship with God. We might just say that we found happiness or achieved a peace of mind. I think it's very possible that most of us here know what that feels like. I know for me, there have been periods of my time where things have just clicked, and it feels like everything is working out. Everything is just as it should be. It's a beautiful thing, getting that place of clarity and awareness. We can learn a ton from those moments when we have them, and they can change our lives. But at least for me, and I think for most people, they don't last forever. That's where the myth of static time can be so disempowering. We keep hoping for something that disappoints, that can last forever. And when the future doesn't stick around, when it doesn't last, we keep on looking ahead for the next time, the greater permanence. And the risk of all this, of course, is that the future eventually runs out on us. One of the quite meaningful and joyful, but also powerful and profound roles of being a minister is sitting with people as they transition from life to death. And I have sat with too many people in my time who realize that they put too many eggs in their future baskets. They have looked forward always, only to find that that hoped-for time never came. I think for the people whose bedside I sat next to, who dreamed of a long and wonderful retirement, and when they finally did retire, they were struck down by illness and cancer, never to enjoy the fruits of their decades-long work. I think of the people who dreamed of a beautiful future with their partner, traveling, adventuring, just resting, but their partner got ill, and they never got the chance. I think of the people who dream of reconciliation with estranged or distant loved ones, only to have it happen too late. Living in the future means risking missing out on what we actually want. It forgets that we can't actually see into the future. We can never know if that future will ever actually come. It'd be easy to say that the solution to finding meaning in life now is to live in the present rather than the future. That was one of my constant mantras in youth from my dad. Schuyler, live in the present. That and attitude is everything, which has to be one of the most dad-like things they can say. And those things are all good advice. But if living in the present was simply something we could decide to do, we would do it. It's the best course of action, because that's what we're feeling now. Most of us would have done it a long time ago. We wouldn't always be looking to the future. So I think it helps to think about why we are so dissatisfied with the present in the first place. What are we afraid of, ashamed of, anxious of, that drives us away from embracing the lives we actually lead? Now, I think the specifics answers to that question will depend on each and every one of us. But I think there is something specific that unites all people. And that is the feeling that we should be happy by what we've got. And when we're not feeling happy or content or grateful, we feel guilt and shame and confusion and out of place. And that somehow that discontent reflects on our character, our worth, and our value. And so when we feel that way, when we feel that shame and discontent at not feeling grateful or good enough, we avoid it. We say, that's not really us. Who we really are is that person we will become. And we rest hoping that that is true. Now, the truth is that we can do everything right and still be plagued by feelings of not being good enough. We can be the wisest person around and still be unhappy. We can be a profoundly admirable person and still feel lonely, even if we are loved and disconnected and depressed. There's a story about someone who kind of fits that bill, a story told by a student about his Zen master teacher. The student had studied with this Zen master for many years and learned a tremendous amount about meditation and mindfulness and loving kindness. For the student, that teacher embodied all that meant for wisdom and contentment. If anyone had figured life out, it would be the teacher. As the years passed by, the teacher grew older, and eventually he became sick. The student sensed that something was happening to the teacher as he faced the end of his life. He wasn't the same confident, peaceful man. And yet the student was still very grateful to tend to his teacher in his last days, to care for him and see to his needs. When it came time for the teacher to pass away, something happened, though, that shook the student. In his last few breaths, the teacher reached out for his student's hand with a look of desperation in his eyes. His normally calm and collected, wise tranquility had been shattered. His final last words to his student were, "Help me, I'm so scared." The student felt broken hearing those things, to know that his teacher was suffering so deeply in that moment of transition. But just as troubling, he was thinking about how this person he admired and believed in and trusted as a pillar of peacefulness and wisdom could leave the world in such turmoil and fear. What happened to all that wisdom, all those teachings, those hours of training? Wasn't he supposed to be better than that? It took a while for the student to realize just how unfair he was being. That why shouldn't his teacher, a human being like all of us, be someone who feels deeply his own mortality, who, not knowing what death is or what comes after it, should feel fear and desperation? The lesson here is not that the Zen master was not as wise or as enlightened as the student thought he was. It was not that the Zen master was inadequate or a phony. It is that even our great moral teachers and leaders struggle. Life is hard. None of us can escape the realities of being human, even in people who look like they have it all figured out. And maybe they do actually have it all figured out. But there will still be feelings of doubt and fear, isolation and sorrow. When we pop the myth of a perfect future, the perfect life, the perfect vision of ourselves, we can find liberation from that myth. We give ourselves permission to be okay with our imperfect lives and imperfect present. If even Zen masters get scared, then it's okay for us to be scared too. if he felt lonely and sad and confused, it's okay if we feel those things too. It doesn't mean we aren't good. It doesn't mean we aren't together enough, or smart, or wise, or that our present isn't a fine place to be. To enjoy our lives and appreciate them for what they are, we have to believe it is okay to be human. Because knowing that is the only thing that will keep us from always looking ahead and missing the actual life that we have been blessed to be given. It's okay to be imperfect, because that's what life is. Lots of good times on one hand, and lots of hard times on the other. The good news is we're not alone in that. The world is full of wonderful, beautiful, admirable people just trying to do their best while being very human. So when you feel unsettled the next time you find your mind drifting to that future, that place where you'll feel better, know it's okay to linger there. We all need times to escape, to feel good and feel comfort. And that comfort is not a bad thing. But remember also, it's okay to not be feeling great all the time. Remember that there are people who we believe in that are the wisest people on earth, those Zen masters among us, and they feel the same discontent that we feel too. To be human is to be imperfect. No matter how much you learn, no matter how much you experience, no matter how many things you have, that's what life is. So be kind to yourselves. Free yourself from the trap of believing it could be any other way. And remember that you are not alone. Fortunately, you and me and all the Zen masters in the world are in this together, no matter what that future might bring. May it be so, and amen.